Okay. What do we want to move into? Did y'all read this thing about the blind attacking Google?
I just read it while we were talking. It's I think that's pretty interesting that you put that in. We haven't had really anything that's not purely techie for a while.
Yeah, well, that's part of why I threw it over here. I have mixed feelings about this. The argument is, I forget which school it is. Since you just read it, which school is it? It's like University.
Northwestern University.
Yeah.
Northwestern University.
Yeah. Basically, their blind students, or the Coalition for the Blind, on behalf of their blind students, is suing the university and Google. Basically saying, well, you've chosen to use Gmail and Google Web Services as the de facto for students. And that doesn't work very well with the blind. So you need to change what you're doing. And I have a problem with that. And I'm not blind, but I am qualified to bitch on this because I actually am somebody who qualifies for protection under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I want to make one thing abundantly clear. There are two types of people when it comes to people who have those protections. There are people who are out to make mountains out of molehills. I'm disabled, therefore you should have to cater to it. And then there's people who are, okay, the way you're doing this is a way I can't. Of course, you don't do things like I do them, so I understand. But we need to figure out a way to get from here to there. So, rather that's get some extra things in here, do some other stuff, whatever, but we need to get there from here. I would think a far better solution to this, because the reality is, blind people who are using computers have certain software installed on their computer, which basically converts the visual stuff on the computer either into tactile or into auditorial. That's what their computer does for them. It turns a visual interface into an interface they can communicate with. There's this whole mess of hardware and software designed to make these conversions. The same thing for deaf people, turn sounds into text and other things. If Google did this in something like Gmail, it would be a visual button on a web page that a blind person can't see anyways. And the only way it would work right would be if it's something that, when you sign, if it was something incredibly annoying to the rest of us, like when you sign into Gmail, it goes click, 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 your mouse is getting closer to the audio, and we have to learn how to see the world like a blind person to shut this thing the fuck off.
Well, almost guarantee that they have some option to turn it on. It would be an opt-in thing.
Well, no, but
when you start up Ubuntu, it doesn't automatically start up.
I know that, and I'm sure it'd be an opt-in thing. But here's the thing: there are actually email clients for blind people. There's disability software for this, and the reality is Google supports everything that any of these clients would need. Google supports IMAP. You can access. You don't have to go to google.com to access your Gmail. You can access it via a mail client, which means these email clients for the blind, all somebody from the IT department would have to do is configure to that. This is not a Google problem. This is, if anything, it's like the story is being written like, well, Google hates the blind. Like, no.
Actually, the title of the story says Northwestern's use of Google Apps discriminates.
Yeah, but they're clearly putting Google in there, to imply. And if you read towards the bottom of the story, Google met with this. It's like because Google's been drug into this, which I think is incredibly unfair. But this does spur on another thing that, interestingly enough, Windows has a virtual monopoly on disability people, and that the various softwares and things you need if you're a disabled person to degree, like blind, deaf, or you need these, or a paraplegic where you need all the speech synthesis and everything else software. All that disability software is pretty much Windows only.
Well, I was reading on Distro Watch a few days ago. You know, this new distro came out, and I'm sure someone will know the name. That's specifically for blind people, and I've heard on podcasts a lot of blind people talking that use Linux.
I'm not saying you can't do it. What I'm referring to is there are whole scores of software developed which is paid for entirely by federal subsidies. Like if you qualify for needing this software, that you don't pay company XYZ. The federal government does, and all of this software is Windows only. And it's one of those things I'm like, that's a little weird. I would be surprised if it was Linux, but it should be. But it, at the very least, should be OS 10 in Windows. You know what? A blind person doesn't want to buy a Mac, or a paraplegic doesn't want to look at a Mac. You know, I'm just saying. You know, but I don't know. But yes, you're right. Open source is creating alternative solutions to that. I think it's why there are a few things. I wish you could remember that distro. I know the one you're talking about. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. There's not as much of that. There are some softwares that I would very much like to see the open source community develop more along these lines. So, because this is actually something open source could do very well. Because I mean, it would be done with the same spirit that any open source project is, which means it'd be a lot more customizable and everything else, which would be a good thing. You know, it's at the end of the day, if you have any disability, why there are a few assholes who are just like, I'm disabled, screw you, you know, bend over backwards and kiss my shiny. The majority of those people would rather not feel like they're disabled. You know, they would rather just, okay, I do things differently. So what? I still do them. You've been strangely quiet on this topic, Jordan.
I'm sorry, something else has been going on in the background. Somebody, no, that doesn't really matter to the topic. Now, the biggest thing, I'm sorry, I've completely lost track of the topic, but I agree with you entirely. It is Northwestern's entire issue. It shouldn't have anything to do with Google, because Google is doing their best to make what they have available.
Yeah, well, no, and this is part of the reason Google, you know, put all these hooks into their stuff. You know, if we're not doing it right, hook in and do it the way you want it. You know.
I actually am guessing. I mean, if I'm generally not one to go against Google, because I do find that Google generally does do their best for this stuff. It might be first of all, the web is a very hard thing to put into speech because of how, you know, we do have the little CSS alt tags, but it's not very good for trying to, you know, especially for something which is basically like an application like Google Docs, which has to go through a bunch of different loops to turn into something, because it's not a normal web page.
Yeah.
So what I'm guessing is it might be the software itself that's being used for this to speak the web page that just doesn't understand what this is, because it is a complicated application, and you would need to basically build the application specifically to understand Google Docs for it to make sense, or Google would have to put something or make a version that specifically caters to those kind of things, which is possible. But this,
you know, it wouldn't surprise me at all if for PR reasons, because Google's trying to convince regulators that they don't need to be regulated right now. If Google would go, you know what, we're going to spend $100 million making a version for the blind that nobody's ever going to use, but we've done it. See?
I actually think that they might do that too, because that is something that, I don't know, I could see Google doing that.
Yeah, I could see them doing that, you know, just to do it. You know, I'm sure their engineers would have fun figuring out an acceptable solution to that problem.
It's called vinux, by the way.
Vinux, okay. Type so I spell it right.
Sure.
It's like somewhere, anywhere. But yeah, but it's like, I didn't want to say that way, but that is a valid point. Oh, there they go. They're erasing the box again. It's like, yay! They can erase my box. They can erase my box. I was trying to look at the clock on the cable box over here to see what time it is because people are going bump bump, and I noticed they're erasing the box again for the 3rd time this week. But they won't give me an answer. Something about when they update their software, and it happens like when they do the time change like this or other things. You know, when they push an update, it erases the box. It turns it back to factory. Basically, they're not doing it right, but they don't know how to do it right.
Are they like putting everything into? I don't know.
Anyways, getting back to
one thing about the blind people, specifically blind, and Linux is blind people tend to like Linux because the command line is so powerful. And blind people, for obvious reasons, like to use the command line.
Yeah, they can actually interface with everything the computer's doing.
Yeah. And because Linux has one of the most powerful command lines of any operating system and some great applications made for it, it makes it a pretty great system for the blind.
Yeah. Well, it's like, and I didn't want to take the stance that, you know, well, blind people can't do what seeing people can do, because I want to make that clear. That's not what we're saying. That's not what James is saying, and that's not. But a blind person is not going to do things from a visual perspective. It's just that's not the way somebody who can't see or is legally blind because their vision is so awful is going to do things. It's just not the point of view they're going to take from things, because that's not the sense they're using to interface with that stuff. So, you know, it's different. Okay, moving on to.
Google does include APIs for all these things.
Well, no, that's what I was saying. They've put all these hooks into their stuff. There's no reason that you can't hook the other stuff into that. You know, I think the big complaint here is that the email is this, and it may be either the IT department didn't think of, you know, using IMAP, or there may also be the concern of perhaps the way the software needs to be set up requires this poor blind student to sit here and go, okay, I want you to change my password to this secret word that you and the entire IT department now know, so I can't have any private emails. You know, depending how that's set up and how that process is done, you know, there is an obvious argument for these students of, well, you know, every person who can see can change their own password so only they know it. Whereas I have to tell the entire IT department my secret password every time I want to change. And I don't like them reading my email because they're my email.
Why couldn't that be done too through the API?
Through both synthesis and API? I said I don't know what disability software they're using. The particulars are not given.
As far as I know, you could just go on a text-based browser and then pretty easily change your password like that. I mean, there's nothing that Google stops you from doing that.
Well, yeah, you know, or, I mean, any speech-to-text synthesizer in the password and so on and so forth. You know, I'm just trying to. I'm trying to think of the thing that everybody's getting a tizzy. I'm trying to make logic out of this. There may not be any logic.
But one of the reasons I do say text-based browser is because if you use that, Google will automatically not send you the all HTML-ified and you know, really prettified and visually, you know, enhanced version of Gmail. They'll send you the pure, dumb HTML version,
which I actually prefer.
Work great for screen readers. So I don't know. Google could just use that same thing that they've already been using and just make that an option right off the bat by using some kind of get variable or something.
Well, there is a variable to do that. There's a toggle setting in all Gmail accounts to go, I want to use this version by default.
Well, using the HTML version, but I don't know if they use version is the real dumb HTML that you
Yeah,
get.
no. There's a way to lock that one in by default.
If there isn't, then
yeah.
I don't actually see the problem.
Yeah.
That problem versus any other email provider, basically.
I think some people just wanted to bitch. They'd have to give more particulars to know more. Moving on to Android goodiness. Jordan, you pointed this out too, actually, that Hulu is supposedly on Android 2.2. I mean, Hulu,
it's working its way.
Yeah, Hulu Plus is coming over there.
I heard that someone got this unreleased build of Netflix to run on Android.
Well, that's the thing. Netflix is also coming, and I'm going to be interested actually to see that, because since we have Alien Darwin now, that means my Linux desktop may have Netflix soon. It's like, I hope. There's actually two big stories to go into here. We covered the Onlive thing when we were talking about the data caps. Interestingly enough, Onlive is going to be coming to Android, which I find funny, since Onlive Onlive is something AT&T invests in, and based on the average gamer would use 160 gigs a month plus using Onlive. So I find it incredibly funny that like AT&T's spending all these millions of dollars investing in Onlive while simultaneously making every single internet connection they have. Oh, no, don't use Onlive. I don't. Not only do I see Onlive coming to Android, because Onlive's already saying that, I see Onlive coming to a Uverse box near you.
Actually, what I foresee is if it actually makes it to Android, it'll be another one of those services where you have to be on Wi-Fi to use it. I mean, there are enough of them out there already that people are still...
Well, I know, but with the home caps...
Right. Well, that's a good point, too.
Yeah, the 150 gig cap for a service that costs 160 gig to use.
Yeah.
Think about that for a minute. That's, that don't make sense. Unless...
Somebody's got to give.
Yeah, well...
I know you guys were talking about this earlier. If we're going to keep creating these online services and taking advantage of the online services, it just doesn't make sense for, James was saying that, I think, for everything to be going up except for the cap.
Well, no, what I see doing is like you'll get your Onlive subscription from AT&T as part of your Uverse bundle package. And then the metered data doesn't count because it's on your Uverse box, so they can tell which data was your Onlive versus which data was not your Onlive. That's what.
But at the same time, the whole caps thing. It's not like we're really rationing food for wartime or anything. This is data. It's electrons.
We are on an internet war. Data is a precious commodity. The internet must be rationed and regulated for your own good. Black profiteering of internet stamps can be done at the corner of... Oh, shit.
Show your internet ration cards.
So there was one other thing.
The bad thing is if the caps really get imposed and really get dropped, one of the biggest industries that's going to get hurt now is porn. And I hate to take the stuff in that direction. So gaming will be hurt, users will hurt, porn will be hurt worse.
You know what?
Anyway, moving on.
I can make comments on that shit, but
not a good direction to take.
Yeah, no, we shouldn't go that way.
but it is one of the things that highly impacts every piece of technology we've ever had.
You know what's really funny is the modern video technology, like we use to do things like Skype and yada yada and so forth, was developed for the porn industry, and then they decided, hey, this can be used to look at things other than boobies. There's a reason for homosexuals. They come in and they're looking at boobs and they're like, I can look at other things. It's like, anyways, moving on.
Sorry, I took that in the bad direction.
Yeah, I know. Okay, because of time, this should probably be the last story. What do we think about HP? Basically saying they're going Linux. They're going to like hybridize Apple and Microsoft business models and do it using Linux. I'm surprised.
But the things that I've read about it make it sound like it's not going to be fully going Linux. It's going to be offering Linux as a quick startup option. If you just want to check your email or something, boot into WebOS, do what you need to do, really low power mode, then go back to Windows.
Well,
it's not intended to be the...
No, it's not going to be like they've installed Ubuntu or PC Linux or something like that, which I really wish is what they were doing instead. They're pushing WebOS, which they own, to help establish it more as a platform. But here's one of the things I honestly see happening. More and more, this is like the great fusion going on in computing right now. iOS, Android, WebOS, Phone 7 is becoming more and more like the desktop. OS 10 and Windows Desktop is becoming more and more like the phone tablet device. At some point, and pretty much everybody agrees this, they're going to cross in the middle, and then when they hit that point, that's the future of computing.
I've been hoping for that for a long time.
Yeah, that kind of scared.
That's what I've said before about Android and Chrome OS merging, how that would be very useful.
And I do think that's what's going to happen. It scares me a little bit because when that point happens, when the phone becomes the desktop and the desktop becomes the phone, it's going to be a paradigm shift in computing. And basically, if you're a more power user, more a get work done user, the OS you need to do that work is going to become a niche market, as well as the type of computers you need to run it. And given that I'm that type of user, I don't want to be a niche market, because then I'll have to pay twice, if not 3 times as much for stuff, because less people are making it, because there's a hell of a lot less demand. It's kind of going to create this stagnation, and I need the 10 grand system to do actual work, and everybody else needs the $1,000 toy. I don't want that problem, but I see it coming in my lifetime.
Well, I don't know. I mean, they both use all the processors. They are optimized for different things, but processors are just there's no different actual kind of processor for so that will all get cheaper at the same time. The most expensive parts of it will get cheaper for everything, because they still use the same most expensive parts.
Well, but see, I'm not sure they're going to be using the same most expensive parts. If the standard for computing today was a 6-core Xeon, 6-core Xeons would not cost $2 to $3 grand. There's the reason that processors like that are so expensive is because not many people actually need them. Now, there's some geeks who want them, but not very many people actually need that much processing power today. And the reality is, we've kind of hit this in terms of what the end user really needs. We've kind of hit this artificial ceiling. Which is getting cheaper, but I've also noticed when we hit that ceiling that the real hardcore stuff isn't growing at the rate it was before we hit that ceiling. There was this, let's push the limits, let's push the limits. And the reality is, since we hit that, I have all the power I need to surf the web and do my email. What's going to take to get that limit being pushed again is increasing what you're doing with the web, which is very slowly, incrementally happening, but not at the same rate it was before we hit that limit. We've kind of put the brakes on artificially. Moore's Law is still going on, but in terms of the raw innovation that's, my computer better get twice as fast every 4 to 5 years, that isn't really necessary anymore.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe it may be more expensive, but you're still going to be able to, get that system in a few years for the price that you want it. It'd just be a little bit more years.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not saying, no, the technology will not stop. I'm just saying the race to the bottom will, instead of becoming like this, here's what the price of hardware does right now. It's like you buy one back from the top of the top and it's half the price. It will be like 10-15% less in that world instead of half off, because there's not this, oh well, in 6 months there'll be another one. So alright, I think that's actually anything we wanted to go in. Oh, well, there was the one other thing. This shouldn't take us more than a few minutes because it's kind of a yes-no question. Do we think, you know, since the, Microsoft killing the Zoom brought this up, do we think we're ever going to get a standalone, you know, link device-only version of Android things and WebOS things? Where they're not a phone, they're just a link device running the platform?
What do you mean, a link device?
Well, basically, the equivalent of what an iPod Touch is to an iPhone.
They're already out there.
Name a few.
Archos has at least 2 to 3. There's the Archos 28, 32, 43. I think there's a 5, but the 5 is getting to be a little big. Archos. I can't think about it. I think Creative has one, but I can't remember offhand. Archos is the one that jumps out of my mind because Maxer 18 has the 28, I think. Let me look up the specific model number. It is just the Archos 28. And it's just a little tiny, in this case, an Android 2.2 tablet that has Wi-Fi connectivity only.
Okay.
It's relatively inexpensive, $87, $88.
Who sells it?
Amazon's got it. I think Newegg sells them. Archos has it through their own store. And as far as getting it in a store, there's a whole lot of difference there. But
yeah, no. Okay, I should rephrase that question then. Do we think we'll see them in Best Buys, Fry's, Walmart's anytime near future? Because I wasn't even aware they were existed because, you know, they're on site, and I don't shop on Amazon.
They've got a really nice one, and I said, "Oh, wait a minute! They've got also a bunch of smaller tablets."
Okay.
But let me. I'll take a look and see if it's available anywhere else.
No, because it's like that is one of the link things. I mean, I mean, Android's not having any problem dominating the market, and obviously there's more incentive to make phone devices that come with data plan strings, but there is incentive, and I'm sure there's a big user base for, you know, I just want the device, not
it says
the
available online or in store. So I guess they don't have it in the Best Buy store.
Right. That's the other thing. Like, you ever notice there's some things they just don't want to sell in the store? It's like, no, we don't need that. We'll stock it just so we don't look like we hate it.
I just checked for the Archos products. There are no Archos products in any store within 50 miles of me.
I spelled that right. A-R-H-O...
A-R-C-O-S. Look.
Okay.
Wait, nothing.
Oh. I can't spell. I suck at that. And on that nutshell, anything else we want to go into, or we want to round this off here before we get too out of control?
I'm ready to round it off.
Okay. Let's round it off.
Alright.
Okay, peace out all.